Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the web conference today, Raliance Grant Program Information Round 2. We're really pleased to have you all to learn more about the grant program through this new wonderful project, Raliance. I am really excited to introduce you to our presenters this morning. We have Sandra Enriquez from Calcasa, Deb Johnson from NSVRC, and Karen Baker, also from NSVRC. And I'm actually going to go ahead and turn the podium over now and pass it off to Sandra. So thank you all again for joining us. And good morning, Sandra. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Great. Thank you, Ashley. Thanks for getting us started. Good morning and I guess afternoon for some folks. We're really excited to be here today and to share with you not only our new project, Raliance, but the second round of grants that we have available. So let me just go through quickly what we plan to cover today during the web conference. We're going to talk a little bit about Raliance, who we are and how we came to be, as well as the goals of the grant program, which is what you're really interested in today. We'll talk about the eligibility, the timeline and categories that are going to be available for funding, and exactly how much funding we have available. There will be answers to some frequently asked questions that we've determined already through our last round, and we will have the opportunity for you, the participants, to ask questions and also be letting you know where to go for additional information that you may need. So just by way of knowing who's with us, I see that a lot of you have already typed into the chat box. If you haven't done so, please go ahead and type in your name, your organization, and we're happy to also know what the weather is like in your part of the country today. So love to have you go ahead and type into your chat box, which is located on the right-hand corner of your screen.
And Sandra, we're also asking participants to let us know what best describes their organization or agency. So we have a list of all different organizations that you might be joining us from. If you would select that, and I'm going to go ahead and share the results, Sandra, so you can see.
Fabulous.
So you'll see that we have a large majority of folks joining us from either a sexual violence agency or coalition, a DV agency or coalition, or a dual. But then we also have folks from colleges and universities, from the government, from child abuse and maltreatment agencies, faith-based organizations, military, criminal justice, and some folks who maybe don't fit into any category. I'll go ahead and take that question away.
Fabulous. Thank you. So I think we have a good sense on who's with us. Let me talk a little bit about Raliance. So you've just started to hear the name Raliance. We are a newly formed entity. And what Raliance is it is a collaborative initiative dedicated to ending sexual violence in one generation. Yes, we are being very bold, working. We feel like the time is now to call people to action. So that is our tagline, and that is ending sexual violence in one generation. Raliance is composed of 3 sexual violence organizations from around the nation. We have the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. We have Prevent Connect via Calcasa, and we have the National Alliance to End Sexual Violence. Each of the organizations is taking on a unique and critical role in leading this new entity. And so the NSVRC is heading efforts to promote effective, clear, and consistent communication around the issue of sexual violence. Calcasa via Prevent Connect is driving prevention programming, and we have an initial focus on the role of sports and athletics. And the National Alliance to End Sexual Violence is managing the development of effective public policies. And so just to go through a little bit, I want to let you know how the name Raliance came to be. It was really inspired by our partners' intent to kind of rally, engage stakeholders, to align with our goals and resources, and really trying to put the resources that we have behind our overarching mission of putting a stop to sexual violence once and for all. The name also really was envisioned around kind of having an alliance of folks that we hope to be an alliance. We hope that you all will rely on us and that we can together help to end sexual violence. And so it's based in Washington, D.C. We have offices in Washington, an office in Washington, D.C., and so that we hope that that's going to help make it accessible for a nationwide network of policymakers, advocates, service providers, and the media to really access Raliance. So that's a little bit about who Raliance is. I think Ashley already shared a picture of some of the partners. That was at a meeting that we were at a couple of months ago in D.C. So that's just who we are, national partners, including the Raliance staff from each of the respective partner organizations. So let's talk a little bit about the grant program and what the goals of the grant program are. So we really envision, Raliance's vision for the grant program is really that it serves as a vehicle for directing new private funding to programs that have demonstrated expertise in addressing and preventing sexual violence. So we're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We're looking to highlight some of the work that's being done around the nation. We envision that projects are going to contribute to the coordinated implementation of a comprehensive initiative to change the culture in one generation by aligning sexual violence services, prevention, messaging, and policy goals, or by contributing to the existing body of evidence and or promising practices or policies that are related to sexual violence. One of the things that's really important and that I'd like to highlight about the grant program is really that we are looking for the projects that we intend to fund. We want to make sure that those projects are able to be replicated. Great. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. This is Karen. I'd like to also extend my welcome. And I'm going to talk for just a minute about who is eligible to apply for these grants. It's actually open to a lot of people, really 3 criteria. 1, you need to be an IRS-designated 501c3 nonprofit organization. 2, you need to be located anywhere in the United States, and that does include the U.S. territories. And 3, you need to have some history or some demonstrated expertise in addressing sexual violence in the area that your project is designed to address. And then conversely, ineligible applicants would be individuals, for-profit agencies, or any other type of nonprofit other than a 501c3. However, if there is an individual or another type of nonprofit that has a fabulous idea, it's always an option to partner with an eligible applicant or to use a fiscal sponsor type of arrangement, and we do have a form for that in the application process. So we were just curious of the people that are joining us here today, how many of you applied for one of these grants in our first round? That was the round that was announced last January, and then the programs that were awarded were just recently announced a few weeks ago. So if you could just answer in the box in the lower left, have yes, no, or either no answer or don't know.
Karen, it looks like those answers are coming in. I've shared it live so everyone should be able to see, but the majority of folks, 83%, are answering no, that they did not apply, and there's about 17% who said yes. We do have about 22 participants who have not answered.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the key dates as an applicant, the dates that you would want to be aware of. So the applications are now open, and they will be due on July 25th. It's a fairly simple application process online. In a minute, Deb will talk about that process. But those are due by close of business East Coast time on July 25th, which is approximately 2 weeks from now. And then by October 5, those projects who are going to be invited to submit a full proposal will be notified. And then you would have approximately 1 month to complete that full proposal, and you would be provided with instructions and forms for that part of the process. And then by February 24th, all of the grantees that submitted full proposals will be notified as to whether or not they are going to be funded. And then we will work with those applicants to finalize and sign contracts, and we'd like to have that completed by March 17, and then the work will actually begin on April 1, and it will continue for 1 year. These are 1-year grants, and there will be progress reports due quarterly. So those are the key dates to keep in mind, and now I'm going to turn it over to Deb to talk about our system.
Hi, this is Deb Johnson. I'm the Grants Management Specialist here at NSBRC, and we're excited this year that we have our new grant management software is set up on Founded Technologies. So in order to access this information, you would go to the, one way to find it is to go to the NSBRC homepage. There's an Apply Now banner at the top of the page, or on the left-hand side under the What's New column, there's also a grant program link. This information can also be found at the Raliance website, which is www.raliance.org. On the announcement page, you'll find 2 ways to access the grant management software. You can view the available grants before creating an account, so you can go in and preview it to see if that's something you think you might qualify for. Or there's a link that you can access the grant management software, which will take you to the login page where you'll be able to create a new account. So how this is going to work, when you go into the grant announcement page, and you'll find a link that's called PDF, it's called an applicant tutorial. And this will provide you with some information on the steps to create a new account, which will explain that all the fields that are marked with an asterisk in creating an account are required, so make sure that you fill those in. You won't be allowed to proceed without filling in those fields. And then also, another important thing is to please make sure that you use the buttons at the bottom of each page to advance or go back, because if you use your browser's back button, it's going to erase all of your data. Also, once you're in there, you'll be able to find out which grants are available, and then you'll be able to preview them or apply. That information will give you instructions on completing a form, and also giving you information about checking the status of your submission, how to access your forms after you save and submit, and then the final step would be viewing these decision details. You can do this all within your account. If some people are more of a visual learner, there's also a tutorial video that's linked. It's a YouTube video that Founding created, and it can walk you through the steps on creating an account. When you create the account, you're also going to be required to complete your organization information. And I have one question. Someone called and said, do we need a DUNS number? We've made that a required field. Our fiscal department would like to collect that information, so that's a required field. So that might be something that you need to gather before you're setting up the account. So in each project within that is going to have a contact person, so that person will be assigned to that project. So there may be times that I need to contact you with an urgent request, so we're asking that you please make sure that we have the correct contact info for that project, and to notify us, especially if someone leaves the organization or might be out on a long leave. So you can contact me at grants@nsbrc with that information. That would be very helpful. And then when you create the account, you'll find that the intent to submit form is also going to be called a letter of intent, or LOI, on the program. No, sorry about that. And on there, the first item that you will see is there's a GuideStar link. If any of you are familiar with the GuideStar, Fountain has created this, or not created, is using this to provide information. So if you have set up a GuideStar profile, you can pre-fill information on your LOI form. Again, on this form, anything that's marked with an asterisk is a required field. And on that form, we're requiring your organization mission statement, the organization description and experience. Then under eligibility information, we ask if your organization is a 501c3, if you're going to use a fiscal sponsor, if you are going to use a fiscal sponsor, what the fiscal sponsor's name is. You'll select your funding category. You'll only be allowed to select one. The requested amount, and this will be you'll be able to request up to $50,000. And then the project name. This is something that's relates back to all of your data. So any information that we send out is going to have this project name. So it's important for you to select a name that you feel is applicable to what project you're presenting to us. And then the last field is the project description. And in there, you're going to include how your project reflects the goals of the funding category you selected. One thing with these forms, you're going to notice that the text fields have a character limit. If you go over the amount, it's going to tell you you're over the amount and by how many characters, and it won't allow you to proceed and submit it or save it before that is corrected. So within this, you're able to save it as a draft. You can log back in later to complete the information. Once you submit it, you will not have access to updating any information. However, you could contact me at grants at NSVRC, and I can revert it back into a draft stage for you to go and follow up with anything that you feel you'd like to update it with. So I just checked before our web conference today in the system, and we have 12 proposals that are currently in a draft form. There are 7 that have been submitted, and we have 36 organizations that have been registered in the system.
Great.
So that's what I have on the
Deb, before we move on to the next slide, I had a question come across that I think more folks in the audience might have, and that is, could you just clarify, what is a DUN number?
It's a number that's created. It identifies the organization, the type of organization it is. There's a link in the, when you set up the organization, there's a link to that information in the website, in the grant management information page.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
This is Karen. I would just say we could put in our online frequently asked questions, we can put information about where you apply for a DUNS number. If you've applied for other grants, you probably have one, and I can't right now remember what the D stands for, but it's some sort of unique number that identifies the nonprofit. But we can provide a link to more information about that process.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I see that there's a question from Claire. Claire, we're going to actually get to that as we go through and start talking about the grant categories and such. So we should be answering your question about, how many projects will receive funding. So we'll be getting to that. So this is Sandra again, and I'd like to go ahead and talk about the grant categories. You are aware that we're going to be funding in 3 categories. The first category is services/advocacy for survivors, and with that category, we're hoping to fund promising practices or policies that are going to improve the response to victims of sexual violence. So with this category in particular, we're looking at promising practices or policies that will improve outreach services or advocacy for victims of sexual assault, sexual violence, and or members of their support system, or that work with systems to improve their responsiveness to survivors of sexual violence. The projects must be targeted to a specific group, perhaps one that is new or emerging for the applicant organization. This could include one of the following areas, and so I'm going to go through a few of the things that it may include, but keep in mind that this is not an exhaustive list. It's just intended for purposes of illustration. So the types of things that you may consider or that may be are a specific type of sexual violence, so that may look like child sexual abuse, trafficking, sexual violence in the workplace or sexual harassment, abuse by professionals, etc. It might be a specific gender or age group that you're looking to work with. It may be such as including things like males, victims, youth, the elderly, etc. It may include outreach services or policies designed by or for an underserved population. So that may be something like non-English speaking survivors, survivors with disabilities, a particular cultural, racial, or ethnic population, LGBTQ communities, etc. Or practices or policies aimed at a particular system that interacts with victims of sexual violence. So that might look like medical, legal, law enforcement, sports, campus, faith groups, etc. So those are some of the things that you can look for in Category 1. Let's go to Category 2. So Category 2 is prevention perpetration. So what we're looking at here is we're looking for applications that are going to reduce the likelihood of perpetration of sexual violence. So that might include strategies for working with people who are at risk to offend or who have sexually offended, members of their support group, systems that may serve them, groups with whom they interact in order to reduce the likelihood of first-time or reoffending behaviors. Projects can be designed to work with juveniles and or adults and any gender. This can include the following areas, and again, this is not an exhaustive list, just intended for purposes of illustration. So it might be things like methods for enhancing access to treatment for those who are concerned about their thoughts or behaviors or those of a loved one, accessible strategies for helping the public better understand offenders or that various treatment options are effective and or available. It may be working with organizations or systems to help them deal appropriately with incidents that involve one of their employees, vendors, participants, or constituents in sexually abusing someone. So that's Category 2. Let's talk about the third and last category, and that is organizational/community level changes. There, what we're looking for is we're looking to strengthen communities' capacity to create safe environments. We're looking for categories. In this category, we're including things like strategies that are designed to work with systems or organizations that are interested in creating, implementing, or evaluating policies, procedures, environmental improvements, and or behavioral expectations that increase the safety of the setting and that ultimately decrease the likelihood of sexual violence occurring. The Raliance is particularly interested in having proposals that have a particular interest or that seek to address sexual violence or prevention within the sports institutions. So keep that in mind. And so again, this category could include some of the following areas, again, not an exhaustive list. Things like developing model policies, like testing practical procedures. It may be conducting assessments or surveys in order to better understand an organization's vulnerabilities and opportunities, providing trainings or messaging activities that encourage organizations and systems to engage in prevention activities. Again, so in terms of all 3 categories, one of the, something that you want to keep in mind is that Raliance is especially interested in innovative programs. So practices or policies and in research or evaluation activities that contribute to the existing body of evidence. And remember, again, that we are looking for programs that can be replicated, so that's really critical as well.
So we are going to go to an audience question, and so we're really interested to hear from you all about which category you intend to apply for in this round. And so you'll see, oh, it looks like you can't see it all, but Category 1 would be A, and that's for services and advocacy for survivors. If you answer B, that's for Category 2, the prevention perpetration category. C would be Category 3, which is the organizational and community level changes. If you answer D, maybe you're looking to apply for multiple categories. And then a no answer would be if you're unsure at this time. So it looks like that people are selecting, and I'm going to go ahead and share those results. It's kind of split, but the majority of folks are selecting C, which is the organizational and community level changes, but there are folks in every category. There's interest to apply in every category, which is great. Any thoughts from our presenters on what you're seeing on the screen here?
Yeah, this is Karen.
This is Deb. Go ahead, Karen.
Well, I was just going to say this is helpful in us figuring out how many reviewers we need for each category, so this is helpful. Sorry, Deb.
So I was just going to mention that in the 7 that we received so far, they've been in categories 1 and 3, with the majority of being in 3. So that's pretty reflective of what the people are saying here.
Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and withdraw that question and pass it back over to you, Karen.
Okay, and before I move on to the slide that's up, I'd just like to add that during our first round, it did seem like there was quite a bit of confusion between Category 1 and 3. So I think one way to think of it is if you're doing something that you think would be helpful to survivors, that's Category 1. I mean, if you're working directly, say you're going into a school and talking to students about safety, that would be Category 1. If you, on the other hand, were working with the administrators or something about the physical or the policies of the school, that would be Category 3. Category 3 is about systems level change. So keep that in mind as you're selecting your category, because when the reviewers review, then one of the questions they answer is, you know, was this project appropriate for the category? Okay, so the slide that's up now, I believe, was a question that was up on the screen earlier, so we can answer that now. During this round, we have a total of $600,000 to award. The grants are a maximum of $50,000 each, although not everyone asked for that full amount. We anticipate awarding approximately 15 grants, give or take, depending upon the amounts requested. And now I wanted to talk just a little bit about the budget and eligible and ineligible expenses. When you go online, we have a document called Guidelines that has more information in all of these areas. And it has a list of exactly what items are eligible and ineligible expenses. I just wanted to cover a couple of them because that was another area that I think there might have been some confusion about in our first round. So we want to try to make it more clear this time. So an eligible expense is direct personnel cost for the project, but that's with existing staff. Because these grants are just for 1 year, we're not allowing hiring new staff because that would not be sustainable, and you know, the hiring process takes some time. So in order to do the work of the project, you can either charge time of existing staff, or you can contract the work out, or use volunteers, or partner with another agency. But hiring new staff is not allowed. So we wanted to make sure that was clear. The eligible expenses are, fairly straightforward things that you would probably expect. The shorter list of ineligible expenses, in addition to creating new personnel, would be capital expenditures like major building improvements and renovations, purchasing equipment over $2,500, legislative or lobbying activities, fundraising expenses, and food for meetings. And then the one other piece that I wanted to cover, you can include indirect costs in these grants up to 10% of the grant amount, unless you're an agency that already has an agreed upon indirect cost rate with the federal government. Like many universities, for instance, have that, and it would be typically higher than 10%. And if you have that form with that approval, then you can include that rate in your grant, and there would be a place for you to submit a copy of that form. And again, there are more details about this in the materials online, in the guidelines, and for those people who are invited to submit a full proposal, there will be even additional information about budgets. But we just wanted to be clear from the beginning so that you can plan your proposals accordingly. And now,
Karen, it looks like,
go ahead.
Sandra, I'm sorry. It looks like there are a couple of questions that we may, they may come up right now under your frequently asked questions, so we'll wait. If they don't, then we'll read them from the chat box. So go right ahead, and then we'll.
Okay. Well, I do see one that related to what I was just talking about. Jenny asked, can you expand existing staff hours? Yes, absolutely. That would be allowable. I see that someone is confused about Category 1 and Category 3. Again, I would encourage people to go in and read the guidelines carefully. But basically, if you're working with groups of people, say you're providing education, or you're providing services, or you're expanding your services to, include additional types of victims, say children or males or transgender people, something like that. That's Category 1, trying to make the world better for survivors. Category 3 is about we're changing the environment in ways that make sexual violence less likely to occur. So we're not thinking about how to help people who either have caused sexual violence or who may have been victimized. We're thinking about ways to change the environment so that it doesn't happen at all, or so that it happens much less frequently. So if you're doing those type of environmental, which can include policies, implementation, structural kinds of things, then that would be more likely to be Category 3. And we did provide examples. Sandra gave some of those. Those are also included online. So, Sandra, do you have anything more to add to that at this time?
I think that just there's a question in the chat box around, again, some of the confusion. But I think, when we're talking about prevention, so trying to change the attitudes and things like that versus education to particular communities, I think that's where some of the distinction lies as well between 1 and 3.
And I would say this, until this process closes, which is on July 25th, you could submit a question to Deb at the grants@nsvrc.org. You could just, a couple of sentences say, we're thinking about doing this, and we're thinking that it's Category 3. Do you agree? So we could help with that until the process closes. But once it's submitted or the process is closed, then we can't make that change. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go through some of the questions that came to us in round 1. I think there's 10 or 11 of them. There's not too many, because we suspect that some of you may have similar questions. And while we're doing this, you can continue to type additional questions that you have in the chat box, and there'll be an opportunity then for more questions at the end. So the way we're going to do this is Deb was going to read the question, and I'm going to read the answer that we provided, and we'll see if it covers some of the things that are on your mind. So, Deb, you can go ahead when you're ready.
All right. Okay. With regards to eligibility, can I be part of an application, such as a consultant or subcontractor, if I'm ineligible to apply?
Yes. The eligibility criteria only applies to the lead applicant.
Can I apply for more than one grant?
Yes, you can, but you must submit a separate intent to submit form for each one, and each one must have a unique project name.
With regards to the scope, does this grant program include child sexual abuse?
Yes, it absolutely does. None of the three categories are limited to any particular age group or any specific type of sexual violence. So addressing child sexual abuse could definitely occur in any of the three categories.
Are you only funding projects that are located in Washington, D.C.?
No. Projects may be located anywhere in the United States, including all of the U.S. territories.
Will there be an equal number of grants awarded in each of the three categories?
Not necessarily. It will depend upon the number of applications received, the reviewer's scores, and the relevance of the proposal to the funding priorities. We will fund at least some projects in each of the three categories, but it may not be an equal amount.
Can I submit a proposal for an activity that was not specifically mentioned in the funding categories section of the guidelines?
Yes, if you believe that your project addresses the spirit of the category, the descriptions were just intended as examples. They are not an exhaustive list.
Can I check more than one category on the submission form?
No, you must select just one category per proposal.
With regard to the reviewers, who are the reviewers?
Well, the names of the specific reviewers we keep confidential, but there are 3 to 5 readers for every application, and the readers are people that have expertise in the subject matter, and they are external to the 3 sponsoring national partner agencies.
Can a person who is submitting a proposal also be a reader?
Yes, but not in the same category. And no readers review applications for which they may have a conflict of interest.
On the scoring, how will the first phase be scored?
Reviewers will be asked to respond to the following 10 questions for each intent to submit form. And then we average the scores together of the reviewers for that proposal. So the questions that each reviewer will be asked are, 1, does the organization seem to have relevant experience? 2, is the proposed project appropriate for the funding category selected? 3, is the description of the project clear? 4, is the project innovative or compelling? 5, can the project be replicated? 6, is the project addressing an underserved population? And I would just say that's not required, but that does receive a few extra points. 7, does the project seem feasible for the 1-year time frame? 8, does the project seem likely to contribute to the mission of Raliance to end sexual violence in one generation? 9, will the project advance outcomes specific to the selected category? And 10, is this project one that you would want to have available in your community?
And who will manage the information and communication for the grants?
Funny that you asked, Deb. It will be Deb Johnson, the grants management specialist, and she's a staff person working for Raliance that manages this process and can answer questions and provide any additional information that you may need.
Great. I'm going to hand it back to Sandra.
Great. So I think that maybe what we can do is I see that there are some questions in the chat box that we haven't gotten to, so let me go and just start asking those out loud. And Karen, it may be that some of these are more appropriate for you and or Deb to answer. So let's see. It seemed like, okay, you answered the question about whether there was going to be divided equally into the three categories. So we already said that that's not necessarily the case. There's a question for Jennifer McKenna, but that question about her specific proposal, I suggested that she go ahead and contact Deb at grants@nsvrc.org, as is written in the chat box. There's a question about where to find the format, and we've provided that. You would go to the www.reliance.org website. Here's a question. What's the difference between a lead applicant and a fiscal sponsor?
Okay, that's a great question. So a lead applicant might be, say you have three nonprofits going together to work on a submitted proposal. One of them becomes the lead applicant who fills out the form and signs the contract and who we deal with, so that we can have just one contact point. But theoretically, I guess any of the three could have been the lead agency, and through some method you decide who that will be based upon capacity or whatever. A fiscal sponsor might be, say an individual consultant who has a lot of expertise and has a great project, but they are not a 501c3, so they might request of a nonprofit or someone else who is an eligible applicant, would you be the fiscal sponsor for this project? And then and there's a form to fill out for what that would mean, but then the fiscal sponsor would sign the contract, would handle the payments and the progress reports, but the individual consultant would likely do most of the work, perhaps would write the progress reports, that type of thing. It's a similar arrangement. It's just we need one lead agency to be our point of contact, and that one must meet the eligibility requirements, which basically is a 501c3 by the IRS in the United States, including the territories.
Thank you, Karen. It looks like there are a couple of other questions. There's a question about, since we're unable to hire, can we use the funds to pay volunteers for their time served on the project?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yes, I suppose so. I guess that would be sort of you'd have to have some sort of an agreement with them, and you'd have to spell out what you're doing. But I think that would work fine. The point is, we don't want to, be bringing someone on and then laying them off in, 9 or 10 or 12 months. It's not very sustainable.
Okay, thanks, Karen. There's also another question from Jenny Coleman. Can you resubmit an LOI, perhaps rework it, that was submitted in the first round?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say particularly if you were invited to submit a full proposal, that means that proposal got a really good score, and we probably just didn't have enough money to fund all the ones that scored highly. And whether or not you were invited to submit a full proposal, absolutely. There were a lot of great concepts and great proposals that we wished we would have been able to fund. And if you did apply in the first round, I don't know, Deb, is it still open that they can get reviewers' comments, or is that closed at this time?
Yeah, that was for the ones
That's
that were
closed.
through phase 2.
Yeah, that's closed.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, they could still request it. I think through the end of the month.
Okay. So if you did submit an intent to submit for round 1, and you were not, whether you were or were not invited to submit a full proposal, you could request from Deb to get the comments from the reviewers. They will, of course, be anonymous, but you'll see what the reviewers said, and there may be some helpful hints in there that would help you rework it. But keep in mind that may not be the case either, because sometimes it might be all good comments in there. We just didn't have the money to fund them all. But someone might have said, this seems like a good project, but it seems like way bigger than could be accomplished with this amount of money and this amount of time. So it might be that you would want to do a piece of it.
Thanks, Karen. There's also a question. About the indirect cost rate, and if there's a cap or cutoff for indirect cost rate that will be allowed for university grant applicants.
If you have a federally approved indirect cost rate, there is no cap. If you don't, then the cap is 10%. But I will say that these are competitive grants. There's a lot of good proposals, and if it comes down to we can fund this one or that one, and one of them 50% of the money is going to indirect cost rate, and the other only 10% is, that could be a deciding factor. I'm not saying it necessarily would, but it could be. But if you have the federally approved indirect cost rate, we will honor that.
Great. Okay. It looks like we also have a question, Karen, about, so there's, for example, would an anti-violence media campaign for youth be category 1 or 3?
An anti-violence media campaign. If it's about like changing cultural norms, I would probably call that category 3. What do you think, Sandra?
I think that's a category 3 as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm answering a question in there, but let's see. Oh, so Rachel's asking if they have a better chance of receiving support if the request is for a smaller amount.
Not necessarily. Each proposal is ranked on its own merit. I guess the only time that a smaller amount comes into play is if, if we say we've awarded 12 grants and we have $25,000 left, and there's another great project that asks for $25,000, then that might bring it to the top. But that would be a kind of a rare and unusual thing. In general, the amount of money requested doesn't really have any bearing on the score.
Great. Okay, Karen, there's also a question. We have lots of great questions. There's also a question, and that is, if you were awarded, I'm sorry, where did it go? If you are awarded in round 2, will there be future rounds of funding in the, will there be other rounds of funding in the future?
Yes, we intend for this to be an ongoing process, and we definitely have money, to continue it for a few more years. And in the meantime, we're working to extend that. However, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't count on a particular project getting ongoing funding. I wouldn't count on that. It's possible, but
yeah, I would agree with that.
Looking for kind of self-contained projects.
Yeah, we're looking for, we really want to provide as many opportunities to either different groups or different efforts. So it's not likely that it would be continuation funding to do the same thing. Maybe if there was something different or that built or expanded upon it, then that would be up for consideration. But we really are trying to highlight the good work that's happening around the nation, and as it is, we are not able to fund all of the really great efforts. And so, that'll always be a consideration as well. So let me see, what else do we have? Can applicants from the first round apply for a second year, and is it your preference to fund new areas not served in round one? I'm not really clear about that question. So this is from Coral. I'm not clear if that question is whether if somebody who was awarded in round one could apply for funding in year two in this next go-around. I think that may be the question, and if so, is it our preference that funding be in a different area?
We did talk about this as partners, and we said that someone who is awarded a grant in round one can apply for another grant, but not the same project. So if you have another great idea, you could apply for that. But because the round one are just now getting started, we would not entertain like an extension of that project.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, there's another question. Jennifer is asking, can we apply for a grant that would fund a portion of a project? So, for example, if $50,000 would only be part of the overall project budget, so they may have a project that's $100,000 or $200,000, can they apply for a grant that would be for $50,000, for example, to cover a portion of the project?
Yes, absolutely, and some people did that in round one. We just ask that you make it clear exactly what this money would be used for, and if you can, like carve out, one deliverable or one complete piece, it really helps strengthen it. But absolutely, yes, that's allowed.
So there's a question from Jennifer, and I think I can answer this one. Jennifer is asking, is it important to be explicit in the project description about why and how it would be replicable? Absolutely. So because we are looking for efforts that are replicable, it would be really important that you highlight how it could be replicated and why it should be replicated. So I would say absolutely. Jennifer has a question about, is it possible that we submit in Category 2 but reviewers feel it's a better fit for Category 1 or Category 3?
We don't move a project from one category to another. That's your call of how you label it. But one of the questions we ask reviewers is, was this an appropriate fit for the category? So if a reviewer thinks it was not, it might cost a few points, but we would not move it to the other category.
So there's a question from Kristen asking about if the budget should include any travel dollars for technical assistance or training.
It can. That's an allowable cost.
So there's also a question about how many applications we anticipate receiving. I think we are not sure yet, but I think we can indicate how many we received in the first round. Deb, do you have that number?
How many applications do we anticipate receiving?
In round one.
How many did we receive in round one?
How many LOIs did we receive in round one?
For last year was 257.
Okay. So, again, right now we don't know. I know that there were at some point 95 people on this web conference. So, I don't know how many other people will. We've heard that there were people that could not be available on the web conference. I imagine they'll be listening to the recording. So, we right now don't know how many, but I would imagine it's going to be probably somewhere a minimum of 100 and probably quite a bit over that. So it is competitive. Okay. Coral is asking a question about if we are looking to serve new geographic areas with this round that were not served in round one.
That may be a factor, yes. The external reviewers, that's really not one of the questions they have. I read the questions that they will be responding to. But if we get, some tie scores, then the partners make the decision, and that could be something that we would look at. Does this cover an area that was not previously funded, or a topic that was not funded before? That could be a deciding factor, but it's not part of the reviewers' scores initially, which is the biggest part of our decision.
Great. So as far as I can tell, unless there are any questions that I missed that were in the chat box, I think that we have gotten through all of the questions. If you asked a question that was not read aloud, please retype it into the chat box and we will try to address it. Other than that, we'll give it a minute. Okay, here we have another one. What is the project time frame if awarded? From what month to what month?
The project would begin April 1, 2017, and would go through the end of March 2018.
Great. There's another question. What type of ideas does Raliance have to include the awardees with any marketing or further national branding in association with the mission and initiatives of Raliance's mission to end sexual violence in one generation?
Okay, that's a good question. Well, we did a press release of the grants that we funded in round one, and we had quite a bit of media around that. And another interesting thing, because our funding, at least at this point, our funding is through the NFL, the National Football League, some of their local programs or their teams called and said, we noticed that a project in our area was funded. Can we contact them and maybe do a matching grant? And we're like, absolutely. This is what we're all about, is trying to bring more resources to the whole field and more visibility to our work. We also, as you know, CalCASA and the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape co-sponsor the National Sexual Assault Conference each year, and we're looking to sponsor a track of Raliance grantees at that conference. We also think that there will probably be some very interesting innovations or new tools or resources or lessons learned from the field, and throughout the year we can highlight those in newsletters or do special press releases, and it may be that someone from the NFL would take a special interest in one and want to go and visit and learn more about it. So we're going to be looking for opportunities throughout the year to highlight the work of the grantees and to try to attract attention and hopefully then additional funding for this work or similar work. If I understood the question right, those are my thoughts, and if I misunderstood it, please let me know. We'll try again.
Great. Okay, let's see what other questions that we have that are popping up.
Okay, I see one.
Okay.
Melinda asked if the reviewers' list of questions are posted online. They're not at this time, but after this, we're going to add these questions to our list of frequently asked questions. They will be posted online. We will get that posted within the next couple of days.
Okay. Let's see. There's a question about, will reviewers be looking for projects that involve collaborative partnerships?
We don't require that, but it's we're just looking for innovative ideas, and does the applicant have the expertise to get the work done? So it may be that the applicant themselves can do it, or it might be that a partnership would really make it stronger, or a couple of partnerships. And if so, then we ask, that you describe, who would be the partners and what is their role, what is their expertise. And in the full proposal, we would require a simple memorandum of understanding, or MOU, but it's not required that you collaborate.
Great. Okay, it looks like we have about 2 more questions. Let's see, there's a question from Caitlin. Does Category 1 only serve identified survivor groups? What if you wanted to work with the team or school site for prevention, skill building, and policy work? Would that be a Category 3?
I might need to know a little more about it, but I think if you're working with, say, a team on skill building, it might depend upon what the skill building is. If they're survivors and you're wanting to, work on self-esteem or safety or something like that, then that would probably be Category 1. If you're trying to change culture or norms, or set new standards for behaviors, and there are not identified survivors at this point, you're just wanting to change things so there won't be, then that would be Category 3. And usually when you're talking about policies, that usually is Category 3.
Okay. There is, let's see, from Gail, would it be acceptable if our intention was to establish a social enterprise with this grant money and able to continue our intended work indefinitely?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know what you mean by a social enterprise, but I would say that these grants can be used to start new things that then could be continued or sustained with other money. That would definitely be allowed and encouraged.
Karen, it's my impression or understanding that would be to start something that could then sustain in the future, so it would generate funds in the future to sustain.
Oh, I see, like a for-profit business
Start something that would then generate revenues for the future to sustain the work.
I'm not sure about that one. We probably have to talk about that one among our partners. That has not come up yet. Idea.
I would agree that I'm not sure about it either, but I think we would need to talk about it. So we don't have an answer right now. I'm sorry. Okay, let's see. There's a question from Beverly Snow whether she needs to purchase Foundant technology software to apply. No, you do not.
No.
That software has already been purchased through Raliance, and so you should be able to go in there. It's intended for anybody to be able to apply through that. And okay, Gail says I did define what she was looking at. Beverly is saying she cannot find a login page. Beverly, it may be that you should go ahead and email Deb if you're having problems. Ashley, can you go ahead and type Deb's contact information back into the chat box?
Yes.
Okay. And so
Gail is asking how she would get the answer later to the question that we don't yet know the answer to. We will be having a partners meeting next week. We could get back to you by middle or end of next week.
So go ahead and send that an email to grants@nsvrc.org, as Ashley just typed into the chat box, and then there will be a response once we've been able to have a conversation about that. And I think it would be probably added to the frequently asked questions for others.
Yes, anything that we answer for any one grantee, we will put on that list of questions so that everyone has access to the same information.
Great. Well, it looks like we've gotten through all the questions, and so I think that is it. We hope that you have found the web conference to be helpful and beneficial. I mean, based on the activity in the chat box, it looks that way. So we thank you all for joining in, for having an interest in working with Raliance to highlight the great work that's happening around the nation. And we look forward to receiving applications and letters of intent from many of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you to our presenters today, Karen, Deb, Sandra, thank you so much. You all will be receiving an email shortly that will have a link to a very brief evaluation survey. There's also a space in there to ask more questions if you have any, so please feel free to use that and we will work to get a response to you. And then we will send an email when this recording and the slides are available on the website to download. So be looking for that email in the next day or so. Thank you all. This concludes the web conference for today, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.